Around the year 1900, people thought all the major discoveries in chemistry were made. Essentially, all the natural elements were discovered and their chemical properties were well known. One thing was for sure, atoms were indestructible, so we would never discover anything new about an atom. Then came J.J. Thomson and the discovery of the electron, a particle smaller than an atom, and found to be a part of all atoms. The next few decades is something often referred to as one of the golden ages of physics. When it was done, our modern view of atomic structure was established and would set the stage for our current knowledge of how atoms come together to form molecules. We will look at the atomic structure here and molecular structure later in the course. From very early times, there's been a philosophy that matter is made out of little tiny particles that are too small to see, until there are so many of them that the pile is big enough to see. Democritus is the Greek philosopher credited with giving the name atom to the smallest part of matter. Observations in our daily lives are consistent with invisible atoms. For example, we can put some solid iodine in a test tube and heat it up, and when we see it reappear above on the surface of a cooled test tube, how did it get from the bottom to the top? Well, the atoms are all piled up at the bottom, but they break apart into individual atoms in the middle, too small to see, and then they stick back together in a big pile big enough to see at the top. Atoms also explain why water evaporates, can't be seen as a vapor, and then can be seen when it condenses into a cloud. It also explains why sugar can dissolve in water and become invisible even though we know it is still there because the water tastes sweet. It is interesting that this view of the world was put forth 2,200 years ago, but didn't fully catch on until the last 200 years. Until then, people tended to follow Aristotle's teaching that everything was continuous, with no space in between any parts of matter. The work of John Dalton convinced most scientists that matter was not continuous, but was made of atoms. That occurred in 1808, and it wasn't until 1990 that finally a microscope was invented that could see atoms. The scanning tunneling microscope magnifies 100 million times, and at that magnification, all you see is atoms.